Hey, what's crack lacking, guys? Matt and Ryan here, DFS 5-pack. So before we even get into anything, everybody knows the weather's an issue this week. I'm staring outside right now. It is cold in Green Bay. I can see the grass going in the wind. That's as much as like we can help on, right? Like you're a Cleveland guy. You probably see a lot of the same stuff, right?
Yeah, like I see it outside. It's like in the low 40s. It's windy. That's about all I got for you right now. I'm actually going to go out I got to run a couple errands when we're done making videos. So I might have a little bit of a better idea then.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is like this is what makes this week difficult is we can all have our assessments. At the end of the day, some of these really bad win games are going to be seriously affected by the win, and there's going to be other ones where it's going to, shift in the stadium and it's not going to be a factor.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't know any better than you guys do on stuff like this, and it's kind of annoying, but with like 4 or 5 games like this, we're all dealing with the same stuff.
It's very annoying. I mean, it just adds so much more randomness to an already like random sport. And for lack of a better word, it's difficult to navigate through. Although, like you said, we're all dealing with it.
All right, guys. So we're going to run through a couple of things. We did this video earlier in the week. Not a lot has changed. We got one pick that we want to go through differently, so we can fly through a bunch of these. Wish you guys best of luck on this Sunday morning. If you want the full breakdown, we got GPP videos, we got cash videos, we got write-ups, we got multiple slates we're covering. Best package, we got $69 NFL package right now. With this being the main sport that we're rolling with, go on the website. The link is below. It's a one-time purchase. It covers playoffs, regular season, everything like that. Otherwise, another way to get a free membership from the DFS 5-pack. You've heard us talking about overlay fantasy sports. We're going to do our breakdown of the progressive tournaments real quickly after this one. There's multiple ways and different deposit levels you could make if you would be a first-time player that will give you a free membership to the 5-pack. They're all listed on the screen right there. The only caveat is like you got to play the money. You can't deposit it and withdraw it.
Yeah, you can't kind of play the system, but it's a great deal. Get on in there. I know the matchup shop, excuse me, is booming, and we're crushing NFL because that's the only thing we got going on right now.
All right. So let's start with Derrick Henry. This is going to be a very chalky play. So I think you lock him in cash games. He is in a great spot as a 7-point favorite in a game with a higher total this week of 51. Totals have really come down due to the weather, so this is one of the higher total games on the docket. You guys all know how good he is. Cincinnati is clearly not a very good defense. It's what we would call a crush spot. If you don't want to play him for ownership reasons, there's always the games and ship idea in GPPs. They're obviously pivoting to other portions of the Tennessee offense or fading the game completely. But if you're playing cash games, he was the first guy I locked into my cash game and the first guy that I would set and forget to move along. Again, though, if you're in GPPs and maybe he only scores once or doesn't score at all, there's definitely a reason that an 8K guy would not succeed.
Yeah, so for me, like, this is a what's not to like type of play. Like, the only thing not to like, in my opinion, well, a couple of things. One is the high ownership, like you mentioned, in tournaments. And two is that he's very touchdown dependent because he doesn't catch a lot of balls. This is a great spot for him, and I 100% agree with you. In any sort of cash game optimal lineup, he's in there. And in tournaments, I'm fine playing him, and I'm fine fading him, but not because you think he's going to suck, but because there's other running backs you just like a lot. I mean, there's a bunch of running backs on this slate that are good plays. So that's the reason I could see not playing him, because you do need him to score touchdowns.
Like, I think he's going to go for 125 plus in the touchdown today. But that alone, 125, a touchdown in the 3-point bonus, and he's still only okay. Like, he needs to go off. He's got to score twice to hit, like, GPP value.
Yeah, he's got to get in there one more time, assuming he's not catching many balls.
On the rare, yeah, I mean, if he catches 6 balls, crazier things have happened. It's just not part of his game, though.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, next up, Chalk Talk Part 2 from the wide receiver side of things. Look for Keenan Allen to be very, very popular today. He's a guy that most of the people throughout the industry have mentioned this week. Sometimes, we use the saying, like, is DraftKings drunk again when they're doing their pricing? This seems like one of those scenarios where Keenan Allen is way too inexpensive. It didn't take into account the game that he left with back spasms. He's been an absolute target monster, double-digit targets in every game where Herbert's been the quarterback. He looks for him. He has tunnel vision for him on third downs. Last week, the weather was terrible in Denver. This week, it's actually one of the more appealing places for something like that. And he's also a guy due for touchdown progression. Very much like Derrick Henry. If you don't play him, ownership should be a big reason for it. And like for me in GPPs today, because I got about a dozen of them set, I'm going to play him in some, not play him in others. And there's a good chance he catches 8 balls for 100 yards and he's fine either way.
So he is the top value play probably overall on the slate in terms of just too cheap. He's, a consensus top 5 wide receiver this week, no matter where you look in PPR formats. And he's priced, in the 6K range. He's just way too cheap. A point that I'll make about Keenan Allen is a point that you've been saying for years. It's not just about the ownership of one player. Like, the ownership of one player doesn't mean as much as, like, the ownership of your whole lineup. So even in tournaments, you can play chalky Keenan Allen. You can play chalky Derrick Henry. If you have that, like, 1 or 2 guys that aren't very popular, you can be chalky with pretty much all the rest of your spots. And in football, because there's so many good plays, I don't think you have to worry about ownership as much as other sports. And I know I'm telling myself that right now, but it's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of guys, and we've discussed them ad nauseum this week, that I like this week that are just not going to be extremely popular. I'm not saying I'm getting them at 1%, but they're not going to be overwhelming chalk. I feel like I'm going to kind of ride and die with them a little bit in GPPs today. I'm a little bit more focused on GPPs than normal this week due to the randomness of the weather and everything like that. But I'm going to have a bunch of Keenan Allen still. I feel like his floor, minus injury is like 12 points, right? Like, it's really difficult to not see him based on how Herbert's played get at least something with all those PPR points. He's very good. That's another point you'll make about him, and I know you're a big fan. He's talented. This is not a situation where it's just some guy in a good spot. He's very, very talented. So, you can play him, you cannot play him. There's a good chance you can win with or without him, but he's a very high floor play.
Yeah, it's difficult to see him not approaching 15 here. I mean, and that's a very low end.
Right, like, is it possible he gets like 4 catches for 4 yards? Sure.
Sure.
It's possible, but it's not the likely scenario. Anything is possible. I mean, It is possible Derrick Henry catches 12 balls today, but I wouldn't bet anything on it.
I mean, if the game script's like to Chargers score defensive touchdowns and have like long plays to other guys, yeah, sure, anything's possible in an NFL game, but I'm with you. Like, that is, I mean, if I saw like an over-under on 8 DraftKings points, like you just said, I'd put a lot of money on the over.
Yeah, I'd put whatever I could on it. Absolutely. All right, next up. So we took off the quarterback we talked about, and you wanted to go through what we consider to be a GPP receiver on a week with a lot of cheap guys who are going to get love on DraftKings. We've definitely seen cheap guys not succeed before. We happen to both like some of these cheap guys, but here's a different one that will not be high owned.
Yeah, I figured you could get on board with this one because it kind of falls in line with the point that I just talked about with playing a chalky Keenan Allen, playing a chalky Derrick Henry. If you all of a sudden throw Marvin Jones in there, who I imagine is going to be under 5%, then I don't even care if you have chalk in the rest of your lineup. Jones is not a guy I play hardly ever. I can't even remember the last time I played him. One of our customers, Mike Sims, kind of got me on him this week, though. He's coming off his best game of the year, as you mentioned last week. Nothing special, but still pretty productive. And now he goes against who he calls his son in Xavier Rhodes. They've got a big beef, a back and forth Twitter feud. He went off on Rhodes last year. And while Rhodes wants to stop him here, Rhodes is not good anymore. So as sad as it is to say, Jones has the advantage in this matchup. I think this game is getting slept on from an offensive perspective. And a big reason why, and this is another point that you love, this game's in a dome, man. There's no weather concerns at all. I think Detroit's offense could score some points here. And I think Jones is an under-the-radar, cheap wideout that, like we mentioned, you can get at much less ownership than the A.J. Greens, Denzel Mimses of the world.
I do enjoy the fact this game is in a dome. I wanted to like more pieces from this game. I just don't trust either of these teams. But I love the fact that it's one of the only places where weather is not an issue today. Even games like New York and Seattle and stuff like that, like, yes, it's a lot better than a lot of the other games, but it's still probably not going to be perfect outside. We are getting to the colder portions of the year. Anybody who's ever played football when it's 20-some degrees outside, it's harder to catch the ball when your hands don't feel as good.
Yeah, it's like whenever you see a game that doesn't have weather concerns, it's like you automatically have this idea that it's going to be like 75 and rainbows. But it's like, you know what I mean? Not always that perfect out.
All right. So I thought Kareem Hunt makes for an interesting conversation. Even though we went through this earlier this week, let's discuss it again really quickly because I think there's a lot of really good points for Kareem Hunt, and there's some less than stellar points for Kareem Hunt. So I think it makes a wonderful conversation, and let's have it in front of you guys. So no Nick Chubb. Big time point for Kareem Hunt. Everybody knows that one. That was kind of the simple place to start. This is another game with pretty ghastly weather concerns. This is the very least. Strong winds, not nice outside, as we've kind of talked about, which again has both pro and negative detractors for Kareem Hunt. Pro, the short passing game. He could definitely be more involved there. 2, he could definitely see more volume as far as touches goes. They might become a little bit more dependent on running the ball if they know they can't get the ball down the field, and he could see more touches than we maybe seen from an entire game on him. Points against him, with the weather not very nice and no Odell Beckham in the lineup, the Raiders have absolutely no reason to respect the deep game of the Cleveland Browns and vice versa on the other side of the field. So, there's definitely the pro volume argument where dude could see 25 touches today, and I would not be shocked by that at all. And then the other side of it is it could be harder, less efficient touches. So I know we both kind of like him, but I got reasons to like him and dislike him. So I think he makes for a super interesting conversation this week.
I can just tell that you don't really like him as much as
I'm super torn on him.
As I thought you would, maybe is the better way to put it, because, I know that we've been on him. It sounds like kind of as the week's gone on, you're falling less in love with him, and it makes sense. I guess my question for you is, what do you think happens in this game?
I think Cleveland wins a close one, but I think it's, at the start of the week, this game was set up to be 35-31, right? We thought there'd be a lot of points. I probably would have pounded, if I were to bet on stuff like that, pounded the over. And this is another game where it could still be that. The weather may have very little effect on this one, or a couple of guys at quarterback in Baker Mayfield and Derrick Carr, who I don't 100% trust. If it's really whipping around there and they're having struggle, this game could be a lot lower scoring than we thought. You bring 8 men down to the box, and all of a sudden Josh Jacobs and Kareem Hunt are struggling. The short passing games aren't working because it's stuffed. Or it's no big deal and the game still goes off. It's a little bit more of an unknown. And when you get bad weather, I think we automatically assume backs in the short passing game. Well, it can be for volume, but all of a sudden now when they don't respect your deep game, everybody's up in the box making your life harder. There's fewer touchdowns. You kind of want the idea of being able to score twice. So I think it's a great conversation to have, and there is no right or wrong answer. We can only make our best guesses.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. For me, the biggest point, and the point I keep going back to, is the number 2 bullet point. A lot of things have worked out against Hunt since Chubb was injured, but he's still been good, man. Even last week, I told you, people were commenting all over the place. Hunt sucks. Hunt is trash. Why'd I use him? He ended up having a really good game. Wasn't he GPP viable? I can't remember exactly.
No, he had 19 points off of 7K. So he was okay. He didn't ruin your lineup, but he was outscored by Bernard and Williams. So he was fine. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't trash or anything like that. But those late points, because the same thing happened to Williams and Gio. They looked like not great pace till falling in the end zone at the last minute, and Hunt did kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Those late touchdowns really save you, because I know Bernard was looking like bad chalk.
And Bernard.
Well, yeah, and Williams. Williams was only okay up until falling in the end zone, literally 3 seconds after you Facebook messaged me about it.
He earned that touchdown, though.
I agree with you, but it didn't mean it was going to work out that way.
True, but he definitely earned it. With that point in the game, how they were cruising, I would have been shocked if he didn't get it. But you're right. I've definitely seen crazier shit happen, no doubt. I mean, even last week, kind of a similar situation. I thought Tampa was going to give it to Ronald Jones for a touchdown after he fell just short, and then Brady just snuck it in. So, you know what I mean? A lot of times they just do that.
Again, I think it's an interesting conversation. And this is exactly why I am extremely cash game light today. Because I'm torn. Kareem Hunt is the top of the list of guys that I'm torn on. But the same thing goes, the Bengals and Titans, I think is a great game for offense. But for all we know, the wins pick up there, that game ends up being worse, and this game ends up being better. Maybe, I don't know exactly how the winds shift in every single stadium. Aaron Rodgers came out this week and talked about how it all depends on the angle of the wind in Lambeau. If it angles one way, it's almost impossible to throw it. If it's the other way, it's not a big deal. We have no way to know how it's going to be on what specific drives.
Amen.
All right. Next up, so let's run back over through one of our favorite overall plays of the week. Kittles and bits of the San Francisco 49ers, 7K taking on Seattle. I forgot to go back and check that this morning, but I'm pretty sure Jamal Adams is playing this week, if you know that one, yes or no. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. That's not great for George Kittle, but it doesn't take me off of him. I mean, maybe now I'll play him in 2/3 of my GPPs instead of 3/4.
For me, it's one of these situations where I like him more if Adams is out, obviously, because Adams is really good. But, if Adams had never even been out, like, this wasn't even a question, I would still love him. You know what I'm saying? So it just doesn't mean that
They
much.
weren't stopping anybody earlier in the year when Adams was playing.
Yeah, so like it just doesn't. I mean, yeah, it just doesn't matter that much to me. I would like him more if he were out, but it doesn't matter that much to me that he's in.
Yeah, like I said, I have 12 GPP set. The difference for me is maybe now I play Kittle in 7 or 8 of them instead of 9 of them. It's a very minor difference. It's just one thing that could maybe change it just the littlest bit. Maybe Seattle plays a little bit more inspired, but honestly, I just think Seattle's one of those teams that they're just not capable of stopping people because they just don't have the bodies to do it. They have no pass rush. George Kittle is an absolute freak of nature. For my money, he's the best tight end in football. Even if you don't think he's the best tight end in football, you know darn well he's one of the best tight ends in football. And another good point for San Francisco's offense today is they do get Tevin Coleman back. So having another running back around could be helpful for them just to kind of sustain those drives a little bit longer. It's not just Hasty, and apparently McKinnon's trying to play with dead legs, so I think this could be better for their offense. This game's got the highest total of the week, and we all love Kittle over here.
Yeah, we love Kittle. The only thing that I don't like about Kittle, and this has nothing to do with Kittle himself, is that as the week's gone on, this game has gotten a lot more ownership. And as the best play from San Francisco, like Kittle is now going to be popular, in my opinion. I don't think he's overwhelming chalk, but people realize that he's the best tight end on the slate. I think that he's one of the best overall plays on the slate, and you're not getting him under the radar. It doesn't take away how much I like him, though.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I think at the beginning of the week, I think we were looking at him coming in a shade under 10 in our guess, and maybe now it's more like 15, 20%.
I think he's going to be like 25%. I don't know.
Okay.
And again, tight end is always kind of a question mark because you only have one tight end spot. A lot of people don't play 2. I just feel like with the love Jimmy G is getting, people want to pair quarterbacks with a weapon, wide receiver ideally, but Sanford doesn't have great wide receivers. Along with having wide receiver value, like Kittle makes a lot of sense to me. I'm hoping he's lower owned, but he just makes too much sense.
I will say it makes a lot of sense to me. So you're preaching to the choir over here. He's not going to pop off on optimizers, though, which is a good thing.
That's fair. I agree with that because he's expensive.
It's kind of like Myles Gaskin. You know what I mean? Like, he's a guy
who I also like.
I mean, it's understandable. He's been heavily utilized in the passing game, which gives him a really solid floor. Like, he seems to get 5 to 9 points in the passing game legitimately every single week. So he's going to pop off on optimizers because, as like a lot of people have said this week, he's supposed to be closer to 6K, but he's just up over 5. They have trouble calculating in things like, is he going to get goal line carries? We don't know. Right. Is Tua going to move the offense? We don't know. Like, there's a lot of unknowns in Miami, but based on the way the optimizer looks at it, Gaskin's going to pop off and be relatively popular.
I agree. So you always got to take all that stuff with a grain of salt.
Definitely, people seem to use optimizers a lot more than they did a couple years ago.
Yes, like these. Agreed, man. I think a lot of people that are building lineups are using these optimizers because most sites have them, and it does make it, I guess, a little bit easier to project ownership, but it doesn't. Doesn't always make sense though.
Right, because you'll find guys like, let's say Keenan Allen at the same price was going up against a fully healthy Pittsburgh Steelers defense. It was shutting down everybody. Like, he would still be popular because he was cheap, but he probably wouldn't deserve to be.
Agreed. Now you have like exactly the situation where he's way too cheap and in a good spot. But I 100% agree with you. It's kind of like what you talked about last week with Derrick Henry against Pittsburgh.
Yeah. That kind of makes a lot of sense as well, guys. So, all right, we'll let you all get on with your Sunday mornings. We'll drop some overlay stuff here in a few minutes as well. Thank you for watching, and best of luck to everybody today dealing with this Mother Nature fiasco.
Thanks, guys.